Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
And as a parent, I can't make either one of those things happen inside of my child. I can't make them have more God-given ability than they have. And I can't change their mentality about how they approach the sport or life for that matter. And so we say this all the time. If our kid winds up playing college sports or your kid winds up playing college sports, it's not going to be because of you.
I shudder to think about how much time I have spent on bleachers, in auditorium seats, in the 15-passenger van, taking kids to and fro to a whole lot of activities. And when I tell you that I could have used a guide like Ed Uszynski, I'm telling you, I need Ed Uszynski in my life. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. We love to come alongside you right for the life you are living. And if you're a mom or a dad, you have likely spent a lot of time trying to figure out the world of kids' extracurricular activities and sports and all the things. And I have the right person at the right time to talk us through and help us guide in that way. Ed, thanks so much for being with me today.
Looking forward to this conversation, Julie, for sure.
As am I. So, Ed, give the listener a little thumbnail of who you are. I know that you're married to Amy. I know you've got 4 kiddos, age 24 to 14. What other details do we need to know about what makes Ed Ed?
Well, the thing that brings me here primarily is that I've worked in a sports ministry for 33 years, working with college and professional athletes, as has the co-author of this book that we're going to discuss, Brian Smith. That's how we met, and we spend most of our time with college athletes. But about, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, we started coaching youth sports. As you said, he's got 3 kids, I've got 4. They were all totally into the youth sport world, and we just realized, wow, we need help. Actually, that's what we realized. So we got on this fast moving train, and we are both athletes in our past, college and professional athletes. Like, so sports has been a huge part of our lives. He was a runner, I was a basketball player. And we just looked around and we're like, we do not feel equipped for this. Like, we got on this fast moving train, and there's so many decisions that we have to make, and something seems really unhealthy about it. Yet it doesn't seem like there's any other choices, and just on, and looked around and just realized, especially for Christian parents, there just wasn't much that had been written. So we literally 8 years ago started talking about, how do we start to gather research? How do we get stories from people? How do we gather best practices as we're trying to figure it out for ourselves? And then it turned into a book.
I love that. And the name of the book is Away Game. Such a fun title because, Ed, you're hitting right at the heart of what I became to this realization in the midst of all of this active parenting. When I was a kid, I did some gymnastics and I ran some track and I played some volleyball, but all of it was designed in a way that it fit into the family schedule and everybody was still home in time for dinner. And yeah, you could actually go ahead and get college scholarships based on that level of activity and that level of performance. I started putting my kids into all kinds of extracurricular activities because that's what a quote unquote good parent does, right? We
Yeah.
want them to have these extracurricular things. I don't know when I started realizing that the cart was way ahead of the horses. I mean, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, what? And I mean, on all fronts, financially, time wise, the level of influence that various coaches and teachers were having on my kids because they were with my kids so much.
Yeah.
When I was back in school, we didn't have this distinction of competitive dance or soccer versus recreational dance or soccer. It just, you played soccer or you danced. I mean, it just
Yeah.
wasn't that level. So how do you perceive when that shift happened? Because I have to tell you, I was not equipped. I did not realize this shift had happened. So
Yeah.
where do you think it was in our culture that all of a sudden it became more like a job than it
Yeah.
was just something to do after school?
Such a good question. And it's a fascinating question, actually, because Um, we're really in the midst of a 50-year shift in youth sports where it went from being what you just described to literally being a $40 billion industry. So it like went from just a little
Wow.
mom and pop shop on the corner basically
Yeah.
to a $40 billion industry. And that's why Brian and I call it the youth sport industrial complex. I mean, that is not hyperbole. It is a machine and it's an industry, but it's really a recent reality. And it's really helpful, I think, for us as parents even to realize it's not always been like this. Um and to just step back and realize how we got here. So you already named some of these things. It went from being primarily about play to being primarily about performance, and winning sort of became like the chief end even for 6-year-old kids. So play has just sort of been drained out of the youth sports experience. It went from being really kid centered and focused on the kids to now it's more adult and coach and parent centered in so many ways. It's really about us being involved in trying to make these decisions about what's best for them, like you just said, instead of them just kind of going down the street and signing up to play little league or whatever. It went from being really affordable for everybody, you said this, to now there's some exclusivity to it because it costs thousands of dollars to be part of the system. It was local. Now you're
Yeah.
traveling across state lines. We've got a family member who's actually going to go to France for a hockey tournament in the near future. So
Yeah.
we're literally flying
Yeah.
around the world. And it used to be really seasonal where you would play for 6 weeks. You play the sport for 6 weeks in a structured way, and then you didn't play it the rest of the year until this same time next year. And now literally every sport is year round. There's an
Year round.
opportunity to be
Hmm.
involved in that sport year round. Additional training, additional leagues that are out of season. So all of that is new. It really is. Even in the last 20 years, I'd say that became how the system works. And I would just say this right up front: that overwhelms everybody. I don't know anybody that's not overwhelmed by all of that. And in some ways, there's nothing we can do about it. It just is what it is. And yet, in many others, Brian and I are both. We're saying this to ourselves and anybody else that'll listen. You can make choices in the midst of that, where you don't have to ride that train at the speed that it's going or ride it to the end of the track. There really are choices that can be made in the midst of that are healthy for you and your family and your kids, even while being you're still a part of it at some level. So maybe we
Right.
can talk about some of that, but we want to be encouraged and actually in the midst of this. That's the route that we're trying to course through this is how do we encourage ourselves and how do we make better choices in the midst of it?
I think when you would think, Ed, that I would have noticed when I was like, wow, how many nights a week and how much money are we talking about? And oh, there won't be time for summer vacation. Like, what are we doing? You would have think that
Yeah.
would have been like, oh, but where it really began to dawn on me, like, wait, what are we doing? Was when I started seeing more and more reports of parents fighting in the stands,
Mm,
parents fighting in the auditorium. This culture that was supposed to have been about, oh, this is to enhance our kids' lives, to teach them lessons moving forward that they can take with them into adulthood, team play and getting feedback from coaches and how to, let everybody have a chance. Wait, that got lost. And all of a sudden, when I realized that the parent culture was so competitive, I thought, oh, wait, okay. So
mm.
who are we going to be in the midst of that? Because I'm not going to be that mom. I'm not going to fight somebody. I'm not going to, we're not going to do that. And so that parent thing was probably when I began to raise my head a bit. And I wish there were things I'd raised my head about before then, but that was what stood out to me the most.
Where do you think
What
that
do
comes from, Julie? Let me throw that to you before she
Yeah.
even asked me that, because it
Yeah.
wasn't that way when we were growing up either in the stands. I mean, there may
No.
be the occasional wild parent, but now that really is a culture in the
Yeah.
stands. Where do you think that comes from? What do you think is happening inside of us as parents that's creating that?
I have given some thought to this, and I think here's a couple of my theories, Ed. Take them as you think. I think part of it is because, at least, again, I have 8 kids. So I have like multiple generations in my kids because they're 16
Mm,
and a half years. So you've got 10 years between your oldest and your youngest. I've got 16 and a half between
okay.
my oldest and my youngest. And I've said before that it's almost like the oldest four are like one generation. And I'm not talking just millennial or Gen Z. I'm just saying there was kind of the parenting I experienced with the oldest four. Then there's a
Okay.
3-year gap. And then there's the parenting I experienced with the younger four. What was somewhat a bridge with all of those is I feel like my generation of parents was very child centered in their parenting. We were all really trying to show our kids lots of intention and listen to their emotions and do some things a little bit differently than maybe the way we had been raised. Lovely.
Okay.
But what also started to happen was a sense of identity through our children that was a little bit unique. Now, my parents certainly wanted me to behave myself and sit still in church and say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, because if I didn't, that was going to be a reflection on them. But there's something I think in the parenting vibe, at least the ages that my kids are. And my youngest are now 18. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Your youngest is
Mm,
14. So I'm not speaking necessarily that this is how it's going to be for this newest generation of parents coming up. And for example, my daughter with my 2 granddaughters. But what I do think is interesting is for all of us, every generation maybe fights this a little bit. We see our children as an extension of ourselves. We see them as a proclamation of how our parenting is going. And maybe for some of us, because we didn't have competitive soccer, competitive dance, and whatever, and we maybe believed that if we could have been pushed harder and had more opportunity, what we could have been. And
yeah.
so then we translate that onto our kids. You're getting the opportunity I never had. This is going to be a game changer. If only you can achieve this, then you can go so much further than that. Maybe that plays into some of it, that parent
Yeah.
identity has gotten too wrapped up in the performance because we've elevated the platforms these kids are on. The equipment is way more complex. The schedules are far more robust. All that's involved is at such an advanced level that we're expecting advanced results and we're putting so much of ourselves into it. Boy, it better be worth something. It better not just
Wow.
be recreational.
Julie, yeah, I
Maybe
love
that's
that.
it.
Love every bit of that answer that we've identified so closely with our kids, which is that is some kind of a recent-ish phenomenon.
Yeah.
um where we're more in control, and again, I don't even mean this in a bad way. We're just more involved with every aspect of their lives. We had more disposable income. Again, for a significant portion of Americans, we have way more money that's available to invest in these sorts of things, and when you put a ton of money into something, you have high expectations for it. And I love this whole idea of just the regrets of my own past or the fears that come out of my own past. There's so much to talk about inside of that that I either am trying to make up for something that happened to me in my child's youth sport experience, or I'm trying to protect them from having something happen to them, or there's this imagined future that I have for them that I'm that again is a good future, but it's an imagined future that I have for when they're 20 that needs to start happening when they're 6. Like that
Yeah.
journey starts when they're 6. And so there's this stress that we feel that when we don't see the end result product right now, we start to panic. And then this industry takes advantage of that. So the entrepreneurs that are behind the whole youth sport industrial complex these days, they know how to take advantage of those fears that we have as parents, that we're missing out or our kids are missing out, where there's some opportunity that they're going to miss out on if we don't get on this A team or this particular select team or this other team in the community next door that we heard about that's doing such great things with our kids. And it just becomes this chase. We talk about the Uncle Rico syndrome. Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, which
Napoleon
maybe
Dynamite.
a lot of listeners, unfortunately, are probably really familiar with that movie. And yeah, well, he was a character who just had these great regrets about his athletic past, and that if he could have done it all over again, or if coach would have just done X, Y, or Z, everything would have turned out different. And probably a lot of us have some kind of feeling like that inside of
Mhm.
ourselves. So if we can control that right now for our kids, if we can get them in the right situation with the right coach, with the right teammates, and the right equipment, they will have a different result. And of course, most of that's not true. We
Yeah.
can just say
Yeah.
that most of that's not true. The reality is, and Julie, you said this even about the opportunity for kids to be professionals or to play in college. And didn't you say you had two of your kids wound up being high level dancers? right?
They did, but man, the odds were not in our favor.
No, and I had one child that played college basketball, but look, that's a 0.5%
Yeah,
of
yeah,
kids. So just again, think about that. We all think that our kid is going to be one of those 0.5%. And here's the reality after your 33 years of working with college athletes and being in that world. The reality is if a child becomes a professional dancer or ends up playing college basketball or volleyball or whatever, it's going to be because they were given physical abilities by God to do something better than everybody else. It's a natural ability that they have, okay, that immediately sets them apart from other people's what their bodies are able to do. But just as important, and maybe even more important, they're also going to have a psychological dimension about them that is different. They're going to want to do the extra rough. They're going to work on the thing that's hardest for them. They're not afraid of being challenged, or it doesn't bother them psychologically to be pushed beyond their limits. There's a whole bunch more that goes into that, but their mentality sets them apart. And as a parent, I can't make either one of those things happen inside of my child. I can't make them have
right.
more God-given ability than they have, and I can't change their mentality about how they approach the sport or life for that matter. And so we say this all
Yeah,
the time. If our kid winds up playing college sports or your kid winds up playing college sports, it's not going to be because of you. It's
right.
primarily gonna be because of them
Because
and
of
who they were
them. Yeah,
created to be. If anything, I might actually get in the way of somebody who's really naturally gifted and has the right mentality by putting so much pressure on them so early that they end up wanting to quit by the time they're 13 or 14, which is what
yeah.
statistics say most kids do when it comes to sports, which is amazing, that most 70% of
Hmm.
kids quit sports by the time they're 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah,
And so even just realizing that it's removed so much pressure from me now, even with my last child, as I see how this whole thing works, that it really has very little to do with me nagging or me trying to create opportunity or me trying to find the best this, that, or the other. Um, I really should be putting my energy in other aspects of their growth and not worrying so much about their playing time or trying to get them on the right team. And that's one
right.
of the conclusions that Brian and I have come to.
After looking at all the data. And,
Yeah.
the other thing that is so evident to me now that did not feel evident in the moment is yes, all of my kids danced, all 8 of them. 2 of them ended up doing it professionally. Even at that, Ed, one of them is still very active and is still in professional dance. However, that run, when your kid has been attuned to doing something very physical, whatever
Mm,
that sport is, that run is still short. And my one who is still professionally dancing is very honest about the fact that, he's doing great. He's in the core of it right now. He's in the middle of it, but he knows that the clock is ticking and he may go
mm,
on. He already teaches. He may go on to continue to teach or do something like that. He may always, end up in the arena of the sport itself, but he's aware that the performance part of it, and this is true for any athlete, there is a clock ticking. And so that's part of the challenge to me. And part of what I hope that we imbued in our kids through all of this is the character and the values that they are going to need to carry them beyond just being in the spotlight, being the one running the ball, being the one calling the plays, because there is a whole lot of runway on the other side of when you're at that peak performance period in that time of your life. So that's a
yeah.
perspective that I think is important for parents to remember as well. Even if you do have the kid who's got all the heart, all the desire, all the natural gifting that God gave them, you still are looking at a career run that's pretty short, really, when we think about the context of someone's entire career.
That's right. And so, again, I've been saying as I've been thinking about this for myself, and just thinking about my 24-year-old son, I don't remember hardly anything at all from things that happened when he was 12 years old in sports. I was his baseball coach. I was around him for basketball. I really don't have memories of what was going on. And he was pretty good. That has almost no impact on who he is as a 24-year-old. But
Yeah.
you know what? The
Yeah.
way he went through handshake lines after games, the way he learned to see other people around him or not, the way he learned how to manage his own emotions in the midst of things not going well for him, which is the case all throughout life. Yes, when you're feeling
Yeah.
lost, you're feeling disappointed, you're feeling like a failure or whatever, those negative feelings that come when bad things happen, his ability to regulate himself, all of that is super important as a 24-year-old. And
Right,
this
right.
and this is why we're saying the discipleship, if we can even introduce some of this language, the discipleship role that I have in my child's life to help him or her actually be on a trajectory to follow Jesus. And I can't guarantee that either. I can't force that. But I can put them on a trajectory by the things we talk about, by the
Hmm.
things I'm measuring, by the things I'm celebrating with them, by the things I'm calling out. If all I'm ever talking about is performance, after the game, or all I'm ever talking about is trying to correct some aspect of the way that they're approaching the sport itself. But I don't have any categories within which I'm talking about their character. I'm talking about, again, what does it mean to be Jesus? What does it mean to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the midst of this sport, whether you're 6 or 16? Then I'm actually not getting enough out of my sport experience. That's really what we've been saying. We actually should expect more for our dollar, because what our dollar is really buying us is a front row seat to watch our kids and experience
Right.
the full range of emotions very publicly with us, and we have an opportunity to connect with them in the midst of that, instead of just correct them in the midst of that. So I just put a lot of stuff out there, but that's
I
that's
love that.
really, yeah, that's what we are challenging ourselves and challenging other parents to just kind of rethink, is how much time we spend on performance versus virtue and character and like being their primary discipler in their life. We don't usually think of ourselves that way. I know I don't by default, but I really am my child's primary discipler, the primary
Right.
one that's supposed to be kind of showing them the way to follow Jesus. And what does it look like to follow Jesus, even in the midst of sport, which just usually exists as sort of this separate category for us when it comes to our sanctification in Jesus. We don't think of sport being a place where that can get itself worked out, but it really is.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student, georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. Tell me, Ed, because you said you believe that parents have choices they can make. And yet I can hear a couple listeners just like screaming in their own heads going, but my kid loves this activity. And their coach says that we have to do XYZ. We have to be at conditioning and this and that. And we're going to have these away games that are going to keep us out of town every weekend, away from our faith community, away from family, all the rest. And it's going to be, but we have to, because this is what my kid loves. This is what my kid wants to do. That intersection of our kids' desires, but they're kids. They don't have the broader picture wisdom that hopefully we bring to the table. Also, the expertise of a great coach. I mean, how do we take all of that, synthesize it, and say, this is what we're going to do as a family, and this is how we're going to create a decision tree for what our kids are involved in and to what
Yeah.
level?
Yeah, I'm good, Julie. And this is where I always feel like I'm going to get myself in trouble with the kinds of things that I'm about to say. I'm not naive, okay, to how this whole process works. We've already established that. I've been living in this. I grew up in a football coach's home. My dad was a super successful high school football coach on the west side of Cleveland. And so I've been around this my whole life. And and I've been a part of this youth sport industrial complex for the last 15 years. So I'm not naive when I say what I'm about to say. I don't have a problem that my kids want to play the sport. So even when you say they want to do this, but I don't think that most of the time when coaches are telling you you have to do this, that that's true. You don't have to do this. What is this? You don't have to do the additional training. You don't have to specialize as a 10-year-old in this sport, or you're going to miss out on something in the future. Look, here's what so much of this is precipitated on: this need to continue to be on the best of this and go year round in the sport is always that you're not gonna make your high school team. Or let's say you're in a super upwardly mobile area. Like, I don't know where you live, Julie, but in the communities around us, there's a gazillion kids playing sports, and there's a limited number of high school roster spots.
Slots. Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
that's true everywhere, right? Um, Regardless of what's going on socioeconomically, that is true. There's lots of kids that want to play this sport, and there's a limited number of slots. So here's the reality: if there's 100 kids in your community that are part of the basketball program, let's say, and there's only 14 slots on the high school team, a whole bunch of those kids are not going to make the team, no matter how
Right.
much time and
No
energy they
matter
put into
what.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't know who's gonna move into the community that's not currently here. You don't know who's gonna be eligible or ineligible. You don't know what the coach is gonna be like and who he or she is predisposed to be attracted to as a player. You don't know if the position that your kid is really good at, maybe there's gonna be 10 other kids that play that position. Or are you gonna be in a situation where he or she is the only one that plays that position well? Like, you don't know what those dynamics are gonna be like. You don't know who's gonna get who pregnant come high
Hmm.
school. Can I say that? You don't.
Yeah.
Who's going to be eligible grade? There's so many factors. Your kid may not even want to play anymore 6 years from now because he or she just wakes up one day and realizes they actually would really rather play the piano or played a different sport that you did not even have on your radar, which is happening in my house right now. The ninth grader that we already mentioned, really good basketball player right now. He's a very good swimmer. He wants to play golf. Like, that's
Yeah.
his thing now. He just, like, he's out in the front yard hitting golf balls all over the place, and we're just like, "Golf? Where did that come from?" And so he's gonna use his fall, and we're gonna let him. He wants to play golf
Yeah.
this fall. I was hoping he was gonna, like, do more with basketball before winter came, and it's like, well, no, he wants to do something different. And so this belief or this fear that's created that if we don't do what the coach says, they're going to be left out. I think we need to, like, give a stiff arm to that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Sunday mornings, like, that comes up all the time. Look, it still is a very real option if you're in a family and you have a conviction that you want to be with the community of God on a Sunday morning. You can tell coaches before the season
Hmm.
starts, we're fully in on this. We're going to be at everything every time the doors are open, but we're not going to be available for the 9 a.m. game, wherever that's
Yeah.
at. We're not doing that. Or we could be very, very intentional if we're on the road, let's say, to still go to a house of worship and go to church and give our kid an experience, not only give them experience in a different with a different congregation, listening to a different pastor. And I literally this month have talked to multiple dads who have said, "Oh yeah, we actually do that. We try to go to church even when we're on the road." Um, because what they want to say to their kids is, "This is going to be part of our rhythm, and we've only got a few years for us to really show this to you and teach
Yeah.
you this. That being with the people of God once a week." will not only save your soul, but it'll protect your life. And so we're gonna model this rhythm. Or look, we're gonna be willing to miss 5 Sundays a year or 7 Sundays, or again, make your number up, but draw your own limits for how many you're
Right.
gonna be willing to miss. And don't feel like you just have to go to everything that every coach or every team says you have to go to. You don't.
I
And
love,
most of the time
yeah,
most of the time coaches will understand that, Julie, they
yeah,
will.
yeah. And there's some who won't. I mean, we had to make the choice to move our
Okay.
kids from one dance school that they'd been here in Austin. And shout out to Balance Dance Studio. We moved our kids over there several years ago because part of what sometimes makes someone a fantastic coach makes them a terrible person to put in the decision making position within your family
Good,
because
Julie.
they're driven. They have a business they're trying to drive to the top. They want the bragging rights that their team won this many state tournaments or their competitive dance group won this many titles at national. They're really a great business owner,
Yep.
and you as the parent have a product that helps them promote their business. And when
Yep.
you start digging in and saying we're not going to do X, Y, and Z, you may experience some pushback. And that's the
Yeah.
point at which you have to fire the coach, and you can fire the coach. I don't know why it took me a long time to figure that out, Ed. It took me a
Well, that's
while to figure that out.
Julie, that's the great thing about it being an industry now. There's another
Yeah,
team. There's another dance
that's right.
studio somewhere. It may cost you a little bit more, you have to drive a little further or whatever, but there's somewhere else we can go. You just gave a shout out to somebody. There's other opportunities and other options. So, and here's another one that a kid really wants to play with his or her friends, but his or her friends wind up on
Hmm.
the C team. And you got an opportunity to be on the A team and everything that goes along with being on the A team, which is usually more of everything. Um, it's okay to leave them on the C team for a
Yeah,
couple years. In
yeah.
fact, they will enjoy the sport more by being able to play with their friends rather than chasing to the next level and the next community or the next coach or whatever. You don't have to do that. You don't. I have so many stories. I could fill an hour just
Right.
with stories of families that regret the fact that they left a really good situation that, again, wasn't, yeah, whatever we're calling it, wasn't the top level elites. It wasn't the A team. Okay. They left
Right.
this situation so that they could chase that, and then they wound up miserable, and they burned their kid out, and their kid didn't get to play as much, or they
Hmm.
didn't have fun because they weren't with friends sitting on the bench, or there was so much pressure, or the coach was a maniac. It's like, don't leave the good situation to
Yeah.
chase what you consider the better just because it's shinier or promises more. You don't have to do that.
Right. Right. I think that is fantastic advice. And I want to go back too to what you said. I hear a lot of times where there's a meme that went around about a year ago that just got bigger and bigger, 18 summers. We just have 18 summers with these kids. When I
Mhm.
think about kids sports, kids extracurricular, yeah, you only have 18 years. I mean, to the point that you were making, it's not just that, okay, well, we're going to have this little sports window season. I do think about, and I do have some regrets about realizing that there were some important formational times during some of my kids' lives that we were chasing the next competition, the next convention, the next whatever, to the detriment of some other pieces of things that we could have been doing in community. And when your kids launch, they
Ah,
launch. I mean, it's not like you get to hit a redo button on that. And I don't say that to make a listener feel scared or paranoid. I say these are the things that we have to consider as part of it. And speak to me about this really quick, too, because I probably have a listener out there who's thinking this. We sometimes would adopt this position, and then we had to kind of stop ourselves and go, wait a minute. I've heard other families say this. Well, yeah, we started this season and my kid is miserable and it's really stressful on the family and it's way more expensive than what we thought. But the Smiths aren't quitters. We aren't quitters. We are going to hang in there. Now, I think there's something to be said for talking with your child, particularly if they're of a certain age, and say, look, You're joining XYZ group. You've been asked to be in this position. Do you really want to do this thing? Here's what it's going to take, because we do have a responsibility to the other members of the team. I think that's one of the great takeaways that we can move forward into adulthood, understanding the implications of our decisions and behaviors on others. That's important. At the same time, I have also seen this mantra of we aren't quitters, make everybody miserable. So what is the point at which that you measure out? You walk in good faith. You want people to know, you're a person of your word, but at the same time, equip your kid to understand when something's not working, or how to discern when God says, hey, we were doing this thing and now we're not, and it is time to move on. How do you advise parents to take a look at a situation like that?
Yeah. This is something that we haven't said this yet. And Brian and I have tried to put this to the forefront of almost every one of these conversations. We need to pray
Yeah.
together as a couple. I mean, we could have done this whole podcast even just talking about what youth sports does to us, our marriages.
Yeah.
As a
Oh,
couple.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. That's a whole nother, maybe that's the second episode.
Okay. I'm going to
Yeah.
bring you back. We're going to have that
Yes.
conversation. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a lot going on inside of us. We're not always on the same page with each other. We might have different values. We might have different insecurities, all these things that we've talked about. But now we're trying to make decisions as a couple. Let's pray. Let's ask God to give us guidance. And then let's come back in a day or two and just kind of see what's going on inside of our head and heart. So just as a rhythm, I would hope we would learn to be doing that as part of muscle memory for everything that goes on in our family. But especially in that kind of a situation that you just created. My default is always, Julie, I am on the side of, if we made a commitment, then we're going to see it through. Now, here's my two caveats, even based on what you said. If the entire family is melting down, and again, there could be a whole bunch of different reasons why that's happening. Absolutely. I think, especially, I'm saying this as a dad, I would hope Amy would say the same thing as a mom. Youth sports is like way down the list of importance. Okay. If we're melting down, which means
Right.
we're in crisis with each other, kids are having mental health issues, we're never at church and our souls are starting to wither, those are way more catastrophic realities than saying we're not going to come to this game anymore. Okay. So again, let's just say that. My default would be we're going to finish the season, which means, let's say and this actually happened with with one of our sons. So we paid for a year's worth of soccer. It was part of this great soccer club. We actually really loved it. We loved their values. We loved what they were doing, but it was year round. And Jack, in the middle of the season, in the middle of the fall season, was starting to say he just didn't have interest in it anymore. He didn't like it anymore. He had other things that he wanted to do. And so what we decided, and we pushed on him, like, why is somebody picking on you? Is it what is it? Is there some other thing that's going on? No, I really just don't want to play anymore. Well, we're going to finish the fall season. And then let's see where we're at the end of that. Okay. And if you still feel the same way and we take all things considered, then you can go and talk to the coach. We're going to send him to go and talk to the coach. And this is when he was 16, and explain why. And then you're going to pay back some of the money to us that we
Right.
paid for this whole year. So you're going to take responsibility for that, whatever it was, $500 that they weren't going to give us back, even though our kid wasn't going to be on the team
Right.
anymore. You're going to take some responsibility for that. And then, okay, it's okay. But again, this decision has consequences financially. It has the consequences for the team. And so let's just make sure that this is the right thing to do for you and for us as a family. And then we'll take the steps that we need to do to get out of it. So that was
Right.
kind of a middle ground situation. We finished the fall season, but then let him get out of the year commitment
Right.
while still taking responsibility for it. He had to talk to the coach. He had to pay for a percentage of it, and we moved on.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And again, teasing out that value that there are commitments involved, there are consequences to our decisions, but it doesn't mean that we can't course correct if
That's right.
something is not flowing in the right direction.
It's
Well, Ed, again,
sports.
it's sports. It's kids' sports. Yeah.
It's
It's
a
okay.
game.
It's
It
okay.
is.
It's supposed to be fun. Yeah. Well, Ed, we could have a much longer conversation. I've got to have you come back on the show. I would love to have you come back on and for us to talk about youth sports and marriage. I think that is a huge topic that we could spend some time on. But
For
tell the
sure.
listener where they can go, find the new book, find all the great stuff that you and your co-author Brian are doing.
Yeah, the book is on Amazon and a bunch of other, retail outlets. We have a lot of material at thechristianathlete.com. Thechristianathlete.com. There's bonus chapters. There's a ton of articles that we've written over the last decade. And this book really, this book is not railing on youth sports, even like you and I just did as we were just assessing it. It really is like a discipleship curriculum for how to have conversations with our kids and how do we
Right.
grow virtue right in the midst of wherever we're at in that youth sport complex. How do we buy up the opportunity to move into their lives and have conversations? So there's tons of practical stuff in it on how to do that.
Love that. We all can use that guidance. I'm so glad that you and Brian identified this spot that so many of us as parents need people to be speaking into, need these great reminders and these conversation starters. So I will make sure that Rebecca gets those links all in the show notes. Ed Uszynski, what a delight to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Julie. Really enjoyed it.
All right, friend, you know what to do. You know the drill. You go check out the show notes because you're going to find a transcript, links to everything that Ed's been talking about. Be sure you're following AllMomDoes on the socials. You're going to find community there for moms walking through all the kind of same stuff that you are. And I love to hear from you too. I'm Julie Lyles Carr, all the places, mainly over on Instagram. I love when you come over and tell me about topics that you would love to see us cover here on the podcast. Grab this link and send it to a friend. That's one of the best thank yous you can give us. And I will see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.